Hello and welcome to another tutorial. We are going to continue our discussion with the idea of what a package is. And when I was in the previous lecture, I showed you the idea of a type in Java. It just means that whenever you say that this variable has a type, like a string, you have to the compiler has to know at compile time where to put when it compiles this type, basically where to put the class file, because each class definition in your source code gets compiled to a class file, right? So the compiler, you have to tell the Java compiler where the class definition is, and that's the idea of folder hierarchy, directory hierarchy, and the packages. And we said that the idea of the package here is that when you launch your JVM or your application, you have the idea of a class path, and the class path is where at runtime, when you run your application, the JVM knows that when you define a variable of type, for example, in this case a string, where the compiled class file that is associated with this type. Here, when I say type, it means class, interface, enum. And if you recall, every kind of these types, even an interface type, gets compiled to a class file, .class, right? Everything gets compiled to a class file, even if it's not a class definition, even if it's an interface or something like that, right? The JVM needs to know where to find the definition, the file, the class file that is associated with this type, right? And we said that if there is a clash of the names, then you have to provide, there are two options. One, you explicitly provide the fully qualified name, like here, because we know that a string is a special type in JDK and it's part of the Java lang package, which means all of those are imported implicitly behind the scenes when you launch your Java application, when you launch the JVM. So if you don't use anything, don't explicitly tell the compiler and then the JVM that this string is actually the one that I defined, and it's inside this dummy package, which is inside dummy package is inside another folder or package dev.java, right? Now the question is, how can we tell where the class path is, right, when we launch your Java application? So you specify the class path as a command line argument when you basically run your JVM, right? When you run the Java application. So if I create a new terminal, let's say I create a new terminal here, right? So which Java I'm using JDK 15 as part of my path, right? Note that my application is actually configured in Eclipse to run with Java 16. Well, that's fine, right? So if you say Java, that's how you run your application and specify the main class, right? But then let's say basically you can say -cp, and then here you specify the folders to be added to class path, right? That's one way. And the other way is to say there's another command line argument hyphen class path, or class hyphen path. We can double check. So if we say Java hyphen help, it's going to show us all the command line arguments that this Java application, the JVM, accepts, right? And so you can say Java options, the main class, Java options -jar if you are you're using some extra libraries, Java option -m for modules if you are using external modules, and module is something that was added from Java 9 onward, or Java options the source file, and this is they added, I believe, from a Java 14 or 15, I'm not sure, but basically you can just specify the .java file, and it's called a single source file program, and I showed you some examples in the previous lectures. So, and then what happens here is that behind the scenes, JVM, first the Java compiler is run, it creates a class file, but that's not saved on the hard disk. It's just saved, the content is saved in the RAM, in the memory, and then the JVM can load those those compiled class files directly. Now these are the three main things that consider the class path. Note that with the introduction of modules, things got a little bit more complicated, but for now you can specify the class path, which means you can tell the JVM, hey, when you launch, also look at inside these folders to search for a particular class file, right? So you can either use the -cp command, class search path of directories and zip or jar files. Remember, jar is just a compressed format, so it's very similar to zip, right? So zip or jar files are also allowed. -class path, -class -path. The reason that you have to use double hyphen here, because there is a hyphen also inside the name, right? So you can either use -cp, -class path, -class path. All of them are class search path of directories and zip jar files. And again, remember, class path is important when you are using classes in your application, because both the compiler and the JVM at runtime, they need to know where the types are, because every variable has to have a type. And then obviously the compiler needs to know whether that type actually exists or not. The JVM also needs to be able to search and find a class file, .class file, that is associated with that type. -class -path, class search path of directories and zip jar files. A column separated list of directories, jar archives, and zip archives to search. So the way you add multiple folders is basically with a column, right? So let me create a new class here. Let's call this ClassPath. ClassPath, right? I'm going to have a main method here, and I'll tell you why I need a main method. So if I do a sysout testing class path, right? So clear, and let's say where we are in this class path, right? So obviously I want to launch the ClassPath.java. This is allowed, and JVM compiled that. And then now note that Eclipse compiled this but put the class file inside the bin directory and inside OOP and the ClassPath.class. So I didn't use the class file that the Eclipse compiled to run this application, but you can luckily it's allowed to run a single source file which doesn't have any dependency on any other class, and the Java compiles it first and then runs the compiled class one, right? So I want to know what the class path is. So I could say java-cp dot, which means here, right in the folder, and then class path. So so error, could not find or load main class path. Why? Because I didn't compile it. There is no class file in this directory. So if I say show in System Explorer, for example, and go inside, there is no class file. So if I say java c and then say that classpath.java, now it's going to compile it. So if I bring up that folder again, there is a class file that I just compiled with JDK 15. Remember, that's different from what Eclipse compiled, because Eclipse put the class file inside the bin directory, right? In the OOP, in the dev.java, in the bin directory. And I'll show you an example why. I mean, each IDE usually have its own configuration of how to configure your compiled classes, but the default in Eclipse is that you have a source directory, all your source file packages are inside there, and then you have a associated bin directory that has exactly the same package hierarchy, but inside each package is the compiled class files instead of .java files. All right, now that I have this class compiled class file, I can say java-cp-classpath here, which means search for classes inside this directory class. And it says that ClassPath could not find or load main class ClassPath, and the reason is that this class has a definition package, and JVM realizes that, hey, you compiled this, but it says that this class has to be found inside a OOP in the dev.java. So no class found def error. So how do we fix this? We have to say that we have to add a folder that includes this package hierarchy, because when there is a declaration of the package in your source file, it means that this has to be inside your class path, right? So I can say dot go up, right, from this OOP. If we go up, we go inside dev, and then also go up again, and then we go into the src, right? And what happens here is that so we are in this OOP, right? Let me just ls again, right? Yes. So let's see. So we are here -cp, and then let's put this in double colon. All right, let me clear first. Let's have the packages here. All right. So we're inside. We want to run this class path, but this had a package definition inside its class definition, right? And then the question was, then the JVM expects that when you launch your Java application, right? Basically -cp and then dot, right? And then class path here. So could not find or load main class path, Java lang class not def error, right? So when we go up, what we can do, we can say, so the reason here is that basically we should, I guess, do a dot here and then colon. It's still not wrong name class path. So dev op, let's see, no class dev found error, dev underscore java oop class wrong name class path. Why is that? So we have this, we want to execute this. The question is, how do we do it from the terminal if we want to manually launch our application? So first of all, what happens if we remove this package definition? Because this OOP is already configured to be part of the package. A class inside the package has to have a package definition, right? So we cannot remove this. A class in general has to belong to a package, so that there is very little guarantee of, or basically there is no guarantee of namespace collision, right? Or package name collision. So back to here, let's go full screen again, and let's bring back the package hierarchy here. So hyphen, I'm going to say hyphen class hyphen path, right? And then maybe let's put this in double colon. So could not find or load main class path, Java lang no def error, dev Java OOP class path wrong name class path. So first of all, let's go back to our source file here, and what I want to do, I want to actually check the class path at runtime. So the way to do it, this class path is an argument when you launch your application, which means it's a system property. A system property is just a command line argument that you write or type when you launch your Java, your JVM, right? Java application. So I'm going to say that system.getProperty, and it's going to be java.class.path. This is the system property that you can check at runtime in your source code, and this returns a string. So class path equals this, and we can do a sysout on the class path. So let's run this, and not surprisingly, it tells me it's the bin directory which is appended or included in my class path. And as I mentioned, that's how Eclipse basically sets up your let me bring back the package hierarchy, which is for the source. And in the bin directory, it's a reflection of the source directory, right? All the folder hierarchy is the same, and then inside each package or folder you have the compiled classes. In the src in Eclipse you have the source classes. Note that this class is what we separately compiled ourselves, right? But Eclipse, when it compiles, it puts them in the bin directory. If I use any of these classes, when I run from within inside Eclipse, Eclipse sets the class path to the bin directory. And then if I say basically if I use a class like class path, there is a main method inside this. So JVM has to first be able to find this class path.class file, load it, and then execute the run method, right? So this is how you can check the let's go back to our source code. Let's Let's go back, minimize. That's how you can check if you want to check any command line arguments that is passed to the JVM or your Java application. The JVM, you can use a system property, system.get property. If you want to check everything, check all the system properties, you can use basically system.get properties, and it returns an object of type properties, which is just a object that is extends from the map, right? So properties props, right? So properties, if you open it up, it just extends the hash table. Hash table is a safe version of basically a hash map, right? Hash table, I believe it has synchronized methods, right? So it's just a map, which means we can iterate. So we can use an enhanced for loop, which we have already seen, enhanced for loop, and iterate through all the entries in a map. And we will come back and look at the collections. But in general, map is a pair of key and value pairs, which are called map entries. So in the map class, there is an entry interface basically. So for we can use var like x in enhanced for loop. Remember, I'm using var, which makes life easier. I don't care about the type. I just want to grab it and iterate through it. And then props dot entry set, a set of all these pairs. And then sysout %s arrow %s dot formatted. And then I'm going to say x get key x dot get value. So if we run this, these are all the system properties that you can set. Java specification version, encoding. This is the class path. And when I run my Java application from Eclipse, Eclipse sets the class path to the bin directory, so that because whenever you compile something in Eclipse, it puts them in the bin directory in the same package hierarchy, right? And then you can also check, for example, os.name, launcher, country, sun boot library.path, right? This is where all the JDK libraries, built-in libraries are there. So this is where all the java.lang packages are automatically get appended, right? And then debug, there are other things. User home is usually something that you use to check where the home directory is. And yeah, so this is again a little bit more advanced topic, but remember that you can check what the class path is at runtime, because this is in the source code. And then when basically when my Java application is launched, the class path is already set, and then I can read it. Now the thing here is that there is another property called the system.set property, key value, and I can say java.class.path, and then we can set a different value, right? So you might be able to change the class path at runtime after you have launched your Java application. We will look at example in the future lectures. But for now, let's go back to our terminal and see what's going on with here. So remember what we're trying to do. We're trying to launch our application, which was this class path application. But if in order to do that, because I know that there is basically package declaration, which means if I say that java-cp here, say in this folder, in this OOP folder, and then say class path, obviously this doesn't work because JVM expects to find this class inside the folder hierarchy dev_java.oop, but I'm telling it the class path is here, right? It does, even if we have this class file inside this folder, because of this package definition, JVM assumes some expectation, which means this class has to be inside a folder OOP inside a dev.java, which means the class path has to be a folder that contains this top level package dev.java, right? And this is in my src, so I have to say java-cp, go up from this folder, go up into the dev.java, and then dot here, and then class path. Let's see if this works. No. What if we say that basically dot again? This also doesn't work, which is very interesting. So the question is, so what we're going to do, we're going to say dot dot and then colon dot again. This also doesn't work. dev.java op ClassPath, wrong name ClassPath. So there seems to be a problem, and the question is, how do we solve it? So I'm going to leave this for the next lecture, so you can think about how to actually correctly set the class path from the command line. And again, this is not something that you would consider basically be concerned with it that much, because normally you run your application directly from your IDE, so you really don't care about these that much. But in the next lecture, I'm going to show you how to correctly set this. So basically, when you can compile your Java file and create the compiled classes .class files, but then if you add package declaration to your class files, then the question is, how do we correctly launch our Java application from terminal? That includes the correct class path setting, so that the JVM can correctly identify where the compiled class files are, right? So please stay tuned. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you in the next one.